Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're through to the Muslim Podcaster Show. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother Affy. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Wa
Walaikum
alaikum salam.
assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair for being my first co-hosts in the new Ramadan Round-Table Series, which is only exclusive in Ramadan, obviously.
Okay.
So you guys are the first. So I want to just get into it, inshallah. And any sort of formalities and stuff, we can discuss as we get on. And today's topic or today's theme for the Ramadan Roundtable is going to be Ummah and going to be unity. And why I want to do this topic is because I was just having a think. Obviously, it's now the 11th or 12th fast, depending on when you started, and or could even be 10th. And I was just thinking how Ramadan's been going in the masjid, and how, in discussion with fellow Muslims in the masjid, and the sort of things that the imams are talking about. And one thing I've observed, and everyone's observed this, that Ramadan is a month where generally, Muslims, we take things up a level, right? A few levels even, whether it's the Qur'an, whether it's, giving sadaqah, we see that your taqwa increases, and I don't know what I was expecting, because obviously leading into Ramadan, we had the issue of the Gaza going on, right? Which is still going on, but we had the issue of Gaza going on. And we saw that generally Muslims were, very active in regards to their discussions and wanting to get stuff done. And, you had the discussions of protests and boycotting and stuff like this. And generally, when I speak to Muslims, more often than not, the discussion of Gaza would come up. So I don't know why I was expecting, like, everything in Ramadan goes up a notch. And I think this is also going to go up a notch. However, what I've noticed, and actually this is a topic in itself, which we can probably even discuss on another Ramadan roundtable, is why when Ramadan arrives, even though there's that collective aspect to it, where you got the Taraweeh, you got the Iftar. However, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but it also kind of becomes more about the individual. So the sort of stuff that you hear from the imams and stuff like this, it's more about yourself and your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. And it could just be my observation. And what I've noticed is that same vigor, that same enthusiasm, those same discussions about Gaza and what's going on have kind of fizzled out, to the extent where the imams, there's times where they've not even made dua. And the reality is, Muslims are still being starved there. A genocide is still going on, right? Almost 2 million people are close to famine. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos, but it just seems like these Zionists are playing Call of Duty, where they just, blowing people up with drones, just random people walking around like as if it's just a game. That's still happening. However, it feels like we're not speaking about it. And this is the question. This is the question which I want to throw in and start the discussion. The Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the ummah is one body. If part of it's hurting, the rest of it feels it. Famous hadith. To the extent that the rest of the body, it's like it has sleeplessness, it has fever. Like basically, up until the body, the part that's hurting isn't like fixed, right? The body is in a fever, and this is something which is natural. However, the question I want to ask then, why is it then that we can see that what's happening in Gaza is still continuing? And that's just Gaza. Forget about Sudan and stuff like this for now, right? In Gaza. Why does it feel like we can switch off? If we were a real body, then could we switch off? So that's the question for today's Ramadan Roundtable, inshallah. Rash, I'll start with you, man. Just let's get your thoughts.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, it's a good observation. I think I've had a similar observation as well, where whilst people are very much aware of what's going on still, and it's still a topic of discussion, there has been a bit of a switch towards, wait there, I still need to make the most of my Ramadan. I still need to find time to read more Qur'an. I need to find time to do, the things that we do in every Ramadan. Like you said, we step it up a notch. But when you say we step it up a notch, generally what you mean is we step it up a notch on the ibadah level. I think that's important to specify that, because even people who are like activists, even people who are dawah carriers, as they might call themselves, although we should all be dawah carriers, but I think what sometimes happens is it's not necessarily that those elements get stepped up a notch. It tends to be the ibadah that gets stepped up a notch. So again, as a human being, you only have so much time in the day. So really, how much more, if you're going to step up your ibadah side, something has to concede, isn't it? Something has to, you don't have unlimited time. You have 24 hours in a day. On top of that, we're sleeping at different times and waking up and still having to work. So I think there has been an element of that affects it. It's difficult to step up everything a notch, as well as the ibadah. So I think there's a reason behind it. However, you're right that this is an issue amongst us as Muslims, as an ummah, is that, like you say, we see Ramadan as kind of all about introspection. It's internal, it's individual, it's in your. I know we go to Taraweeh together, but it's very much about the self. Whereas really, Ramadan equally, it's about your obligations. So if there's a obligation, then all of them need to be stepped up a notch. So if we all knew that there was also an obligation to liberate our brothers and sisters in all parts of the world that they're suffering, then Ramadan should also be that time to go, wait there a minute, we need to step up our efforts in getting to that liberation. But the issue is, and to answer that part of the question, is that I think one of the issues is, if you asked 100 Muslims, how do we unite the ummah? What is the issue? The issue is you'd probably get 50 different answers or 20 different answers. And that's part of what needs to be resolved, because I think the lack of clarity amongst the ummah in terms of, we all need to be on this page. We all need to be on this one mission. This is how we get unity. This is how we solve those problems. Makes it easier for you to go, you know what? I'm not going to make a change as an individual. And then the natural default position is to kind of take a little bit of a step back and go, well, the least I can do is maximize my ibadah. Let me save myself on the day of judgment. And I think that's the default position we fall into as Muslims, rather than going, wait there a minute, I'm not going to solve it in a month. Gaza is not going to be solved in a month. Sudan is not going to be solved in a month. So there's an element of, well, actually, that's still going to be going on. I still need to get the most of my Ramadan. And I'm not saying that's a right or a wrong way of thinking about it, because at the end of the day, we're all here to make sure we attain Jannah. But I suppose the question I would ask back is, will we attain Jannah if we just think about the self in this month and not think about how do we put some steps in place to solve the issues of our Muslim brothers and sisters?
Jazakallah, bro. That's a really good question, and we'll come back to that one, because there's actually another question I want to pose as well off the back of what you're saying, which was the fact that you mentioned even activists and dawah carriers and stuff like this, they focus on the ibadah and take a bit of a back step in those activities, and maybe there's a misunderstanding as to why they don't see those activities as also being ibadah and worship. But we'll come to that maybe later on. Affy, what are you saying, bro? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Rash says. I think I'll probably just try and give a different angle to it, perhaps. I don't think people have forgotten about Gaza or what's going on in the world. I think it's taken in Ramadan, their thoughts and their actions towards Gaza are probably taken a different route. So, for example, when I look on the streets and at the traffic lights near my house, every day there's little lads standing there with buckets of cash, buckets for people to donate to Gaza, and everyone who stops at those lights is putting money in. So that link with Gaza is still there. It's apparent. when they're doing dua in the mosque, it's or they might not mention Gaza, but you know that they're referring to it or implying towards it. So I think people's actions towards Ramadan have probably taken a different route because they're not talking about it for the reasons that Rash mentioned. But I think the bigger issue here is actually what's so different in Ramadan to what they were doing before. Okay, they might have been talking about Gaza, but the actions in relations to the solutions, to the help that they need, it wasn't really there anyway. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 6 or so months or however it's been since the Zionists started attacking, and it's still carrying on. So I think we've got to be a bit realistic in how we describe the situation and what we expect from the Ummah, because it's clear that the way Islam has been given to the Muslims en masse, and even we weren't immune to it. It happened to us as well. It was a very individualistic religion, apart from Ramadan, where you do iftar and the 5 pillars, etc. And when that's been cemented and instilled in people for generations and generations and years, then that impacts the way people think and the way that they're going to refer or relate to an issue. And Ramadan has probably just brought it to the forefront a bit more because, like you say, how do people switch off conversations? But I think the conversations might have switched off, but I don't think the thinking has.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point, bro. And if I was to be, I was going to say devil's advocate. However, he's locked up at the moment, isn't he? So I can't be his advocate. But you know what? I hear what you guys are saying. I hear what you guys are saying. But the question still begs that, and it still stands, sorry, the question still stands that if we look at the hadith and we look at the description, then I think that what we have to do then is we have to then accept where we are, in the sense like we are not there. Because you make a really good point, Affy, that what we were doing before Ramadan and what we're doing in Ramadan, if we weren't doing what was needed anyway, then it doesn't matter, because either you don't do it in Ramadan or you do more of the same, right? But that description, see, because when I've looked into it, I'm not no medicine student, but I've always found this hadith fascinating. That Allah, the Messenger ﷺ uses the example of the body. Could have been the example of, there's hadiths about the Muslims are like a house, that each brick supports itself. There's other hadiths, but this hadith where you're talking about a living body, and if you can actually reflect on it, I think that if my left hand was bleeding, the rest of the body doesn't think actually I'm right-handed. It's already the left hand, so I'm not really too concerned about it. And I'm not even talking about how Majid, the Muslim podcaster, thinks. I'm talking about how the body reacts. The body doesn't discriminate in regards to your left hand or your right hand. It's going to come to its aid, and the process of recovery kicks in. All the nerves, all the signals are sent to the brain, and all the the process of healing the wound. All of that kicks in instantly. There's actually, there's no two ways. It's not like, oh, it's only the foot or it's only the pinky, or you understand. There's none of that. There's no discrimination. It just happens. And if you look at the hadith, subhanallah, and if you think about it also as well, like when people are ill, they have the flu or they have fever and stuff like this, that feverish, the symptoms of the heat and that's actually the body fighting that virus.
Yeah.
The body is fighting the virus, and that's the symptoms. So when you look at the hadith, that the body feels the pain of the other part and it reacts with sleeplessness and fever, in the sense like these symptoms of sleeplessness and fever are part of the symptoms of it trying to come to the aid of the part that's hurting. So what we have to then ask ourselves is, it seems like we're far off from that, because that is a description of the Ummah, right? And
can I give a slightly different perspective on the same hadith? I think you're right to reflect on it that way, because that brings it to life, because you're saying that clearly, as a human being, you appreciate that. We have a little prick on one little finger that's hurting, and you can't ignore it. It's impossible to ignore. But we're looking at that as a physical human body. Another way to look at it is the ummah is one body collectively, and for the body to react in the correct way, it needs a head. Because where are the decisions made? When the body has a pinprick, the other hand doesn't try and do that without the head giving some instruction to the other hand to fix it. If I have a problem with my knee or any part of my body, and I use another part of my body to go and resuscitate it or do something to protect it, the signal is first sent to the brain, and then the brain tells it what to do, and then I use another body part to go and fix it. The head, we are ummah without a head. The body, we are a body without a head. The body is what dictates, what guides, what decides, what looks at the symptoms, what looks at the solutions, what are the options, and it carries out the relevant solution. An ummah without a head is an ummah without a leader. An ummah without a head is an ummah where all of the other faculties might be there, but the faculty to unite all of those apparatus together to solve a problem is not there. Yeah. So, and I think I can't remember if it was Isra Ahmed or was it someone else who said it, and he described it quite well. He was like saying it's that without a leader of the whole ummah, then you have a body without a head, and linked it to the same hadith. It says your body without head because it can't decision make. And I think for me that leads into a question about, is it the leader that unites, or does unity lead to the leader, or does a leader lead to unity? Does that question make sense? Because sometimes it's dead easy. We're always complaining about unity. We're always saying there's a problem. We need Muslims, you need to unite to solve an issue. But actually, you can ask it two ways. Is sometimes people are saying, well, we all need to unite, and then there will be a leader. But then the other time you go, actually, like a shepherd, you need the leader in the first place to unite the people, because otherwise they're all over the place. So it's a little bit catch-22 sometimes if you look at it. One leads to the other, but the other leads to the former. So to me, really, it's because the head's not there, which is why that hadith, you can't go and solve the problem, because everybody's, maybe this hand is thinking of one solution, this foot is thinking of another solution, the other foot is thinking of, I'm just giving a vague analogy, everybody is thinking of a different solution, but we need the head. And that's where there needs to be a leader of the Muslims in order to solve that. And then to link it quickly to Ramadan is, I think that's maybe some of people's apprehensions. The 6 months have gone, and Affy's point is valid. Like in the 5-6 months before Ramadan, yeah, we exhausted a lot of the actions we thought normally we do. Your protests, your lobbying, all of these kind of things, the charity, we exhausted them. So we actually hit Ramadan at a time where it kind of feels like none of them have had any effect. And I would even go as far as saying, linking to your point, Madge, about, yes, the Muslims have been agitated by this extremely, but enough non-Muslims have been agitated this as well. So we, as Muslims, we can't necessarily take all the credit for the fact that much of the world is, you'd like to think now, below the elite level. Many of the people in the world are more pro-Palestine and are more pro-ceasefire. We've seen that from the votes and stuff, are more pro-ceasefire, more pro-Palestine, and many of people are realizing what this Zionist state is all about. I see more things from non-Muslims now going, this state shouldn't deserve to exist. That's from non-Muslims. So there's been this process that's going. So Muslims can't necessarily take credit for that. And I think that has gradually led us into Ramadan. And we're now in Ramadan going, yeah, we can carry on those things that haven't really achieved anything somewhat, or we can focus on ourselves, because otherwise we're going to miss the opportunity to make the most of Ramadan. I think that those two things have maybe caused what you said at the beginning, where there is a feeling of people have slightly switched off the Gaza issue. If Affy's right, though, it's still there. I'm hearing it in every dua still. I've not listened to a single dua by a single lead sermon being given where Gaza hasn't been mentioned, even in dua.
The thing is that's not me trying to sit on a pedestal to say, this is what other people are doing. This is something which affects everyone, and I'm putting myself in that boat. It's just my observation, and it may well be that it's not an observation for everyone. It's just what I'm seeing. But Affy, I know that you wanted to make some comments earlier when Rash was speaking, so I'm going to give you the opportunity, bro.
Yeah, no, Rash triggered some thinking. So although I do agree with what Rash was saying in terms of the solution, but I think coming back to the question that Maj asked, I think there's something that happens before, which is when you are in pain or there's something wrong with part of your body, the reaction and the impact is on the whole body. Let's not go to solution yet. Is that feeling of that pain? So, if I've broken my arm, it's not like the pain and the impact is just on my arm. My whole body knows that actually I am incapacitated here. And I worry, and I don't know. I think there's some other factors here whereby if you look at it just on face value, do people really feel like the homelessness, the abuse of our brothers and sisters, or you're reading stories about children being abused over there? Are we feeling it? And I'm talking collectively as an ummah here, which will come back to Majid's point. Are we feeling it that like that is mine, that is my problem, and therefore the body is constantly going to be feeling the effects while that problem exists? So if you've got a fever or flu or COVID or whatever, your body's going to be feeling that constantly till you're relieved and the condition is gone. It doesn't. All right, the symptoms might reside and go down, but that's as the condition is going away. We've got the same condition at the same intensity, but the reaction is going down, which then begs the question about why. So, and I think it's too superficial to say that they're not feeling the problem, because I don't believe that that is the case. I think there's other factors there which are impacting it, which is probably where the discussion might need to go.
Yeah, so I mean that's really interesting. I mean, with the kids at home, so with iftar and stuff like this, I'm always trying to bring back bring it back home about when it's close to iftar time, that I don't want to hear any of you ever complain again about food and stuff like this. No matter what it is, dal or whatever, you're gonna have to just eat it, yeah. But jokes aside, and you know what, you can say it and they'll agree, but when you live in a materialistic society, can you really, really appreciate that? But at the end of the day, no one's saying, look, because we can't. You can't experience a famine without being in a famine. But just going to this point then that you raised, because I think it's kind of linked to what Rash is saying and what you're saying. I think we can't say that Muslims are not feeling it. I think that's something which, unless, I think, where that falls into it. Because the issue of the body, I think we're at the stage where it's one body, but at the moment it's just not functioning like a body as it should do. Okay? If someone's not feeling it, they're not even part of the body. They are an alien to the body. I'll say that outright. If someone's not feeling it, right? So that's why I would say, you know what? All Muslims will be feeling the pain, right? So then the question, like what Rash said, we can see that it's feeling this pain, but then how to react next? And the angle that Rash took was to do with about the head. So I mean, I think it's worth discussing, because when we're talking about the example of the body and Rash was saying the right hand and the left hand and stuff like this, right? Actually, from a biological point of view, I sound like I know what I'm talking about there, right? Is that when just say your hand is cut and the signal is sent to the brain, then the brain, it's not like it sends a signal to the right hand to do something. That fixing process, the first couple of things that the brain identifies is where's the wound, what's caused it, and what do I need to do to fix it? Really important. Once it's identified all that information, only then will it then use what resources it has to fix the problem. The important thing is, even though this is all natural and it's all like instinctive, I can't really call it instinctive, but it's natural, right? It's there's no stages here where I want to do this, I don't want to do this. It just happens. So what's really interesting from what Rash said is those three questions about what's hurt, maybe the degree of the damage, and what do I need to fix it. If that comes from the brain, from the head, and then is sent down the nerve system on whatever, right? If that head isn't there, or that head is maybe intoxicated or whatever, is it going to be able to arrive at the right understanding of what the problem is? And if it doesn't arrive at that, then how can it then prescribe the right solution? What do you guys think? I'm just trying to build on this example here.
And to be fair, that's why I went there straight away. And Affy's right. Probably should discuss some more of the symptoms and some of the other factors before we go like into solution mode. But the reason kind of went into solution mode straight away is because, like you say, that whole example of a body, it is referring to the whole ummah. It's not talking about an individual. It is referring to the whole ummah. And what do we even mean by a whole ummah? We always say ummah, one ummah, united ummah. We use these words. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us the ummatun wasat, isn't it? The middle nation. It's ummah. There's many other things in the Qur'an that's referring to ummah. But what does ummah even mean, isn't it? Ummah is like everybody, the believers. Yeah. And then what do we believe? Do we believe the same thing? Yes, we do. But then the solutions need to be the same thing as well. And I think that's where we fall down a little bit, because that's where clearly we're not all on the same page. Because if we all had the same solution, what is it in order to do the same maqsad, the same like ultimate, we're all working to the same direction, yeah? And that's where the head comes in, isn't it? Because no matter how you even look, and I know I might sound like a broken record sometimes, even like you take a company, why do you have a CEO? Because you need a vision. You need one person driving that vision. You need people below that believe in that vision. You need to make that vision clear. Everybody needs to be on the same page. The companies that are successful is where the person right at the top has a vision that person is capable of pushing that vision down the whole infrastructure. And then that business is successful. Yeah, because the marketing team, understands the vision and does some good marketing. The sales team, sell based on that vision. The developers, and okay, I'm just using a example of a tech company because of my background. But if everybody has the same vision, they're all feeding into it, and that needs a head. And that's the same. The ummah is, if we look at an ummah, it's a whole body, because there's nearly 2 billion of us now. The number is just unfathomable if you think about it, and they're saying that there's thousands of people that become Muslims just because of what's happening in Gaza, because they're seeing the Muslims and how they're reacting to travesty and how they're sacrificing. Even the little boys that are talking about opening their iftar, they've got no food. They're like, fasting is easy for us because we've been fasting for the last 5 months, 6 months. So I think that level of unity, we need to talk about that. And there's two sides to it, just very quickly for me. The two sides to it is there needs to be the discussion to make sure everybody gets on the same page, so they recognize what that solution is together. There has to be like leading towards a critical mass. There has to be a critical mass of people that are all saying, I said right at the beginning, if you ask 100 people, you get 50 different answers. What you want to be in a situation is you ask 100 Muslims and 80 of them or 60 of them, 70 of them all say the same thing. Not word for word, but they mean the same thing. This is what we need. And it's easy, everybody, we need unity. But what does that unity look like? How do I get to that unity? There needs to be that critical mass. But then just the second part of that, linked to that, is you're never going to solve the problems. And we know it's not a utopia, but you're never going to solve the problems until that leads to a leader of an area of people. It's not going to, there's no way. Let's take the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no way that people who are in positions of power today, of all of these nation states, are suddenly going to go, yeah, let's all just give up our power and give the power to this one leader and let's unite all of our lands. To think that, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of doing anything, but to think that would be naive on many levels, on top of the fact that many of these leaders we've seen that they've exposed themselves in the last few months. So they've exposed, that's never going to happen. It's never going to be that they're all going to suddenly give up the position. The same way the Quraysh, yeah, they offered leadership to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but at the end of the day, that was just as a means for him to work within the system that they had already got there. And he was like, no, I'm not going to compromise. You either have my way or it's the highway. Yeah, this is what I'm working for. So it's very important that that critical mass has to happen amongst people, and then a leader will come, and that leader won't be at that time, all of the lands won't be united, but it will be a leader that will be implementing the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that will be an example for other people. And then people will be united. So unity comes after that. In my opinion, unity of all of the ummah doesn't come first. Critical mass comes first, of enough people thinking the same way. Then there is the establishment of Islam in the correct domain. Then there is there's a leader, and then there's that establishment, and then there is propagation. And that's how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it as well.
I think I totally agree with you, of course. But I think, so what Affy mentioned earlier as well, I think it's worth, because what I don't want to do is have a discussion where we always conclude the same thing anyway, that we need a leader for unity, yeah? It's the truth, and we will always say it because it's the truth. But, I was just thinking about this when you were speaking, Rash. We say, we've understood that the Ummah feels the pain. Now, there's obviously things that lead up to unity. So, for example, you need the leader, but then there's the question of, why is it that we haven't got this leader, and what do we need to do as an ummah? Because if you think about it, ultimately, when you look at when the Ansar and the Aus and Khazraj were going to fight each other, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Hold on to the rope of Allah. This is before the leader. This is more important than the leader. Hold on to the rope of Allah. Do not be disunited. And the rope of Allah is what? Is the Qur'an, is the Aqeedah, is the Deen. So this is something which is a prerequisite. Because look, okay, we can say that we feel the pain. We've said that. But does pain have levels? Like, how can you have pain? And I think this is the confusing thing. And this is why I brought this question about the body. How can you have pain and then not respond? Now, one thing could be that you don't know how to respond. But if there's a pain, then you're going to try to find out how to respond. And if someone gives you solution A and it doesn't fix you, you ain't just going to say, well, this guy told me this and okay, I'm going to apply this now. Actually, it doesn't work. I need to find something else. Well, you know why? The pain's still there. You're going to try another thing. Guess what? Pain's still there. Up until you've not solved that problem, that pain is still going to be there. So is it like easy for us to just say, well, we feel the pain? Because if we felt the pain, and surely there would be more than a token gesture of saying we feel the pain. And I don't want people to think I'm being harsh here. I'm just trying to be realistic. Like, we can, for the issue of Palestine, we've been feeling the pain for 75 years. Right? And all that's happened throughout us feeling that pain is now there's almost nothing left of what was, the original Palestine. Okay? So there's that issue of pain, and there's one more thing I want to bring in as well before we close as a topic of discussion. But let's deal with this issue first. But I'll just throw it in anyway because you might want to make the link, if there is one. We're talking about solutions. We're talking about Muslims feeling the pain. We're talking about our body. Could it be that it's very important that we also discuss that maybe this body has been injected with viruses, with entities that are other than the body, but they're in this body, which is actually keeping this body from reacting in the correct way and to be able to move and heal the wound in the way it should do. Is that a possibility? Just throwing that in there. But Affy, going to about my first point about the issue to do with Aqeedah, the issue to do with the pain, this is all about the Akhirah, ultimately, right? Is there an understanding? Are we lacking in understanding? Is there certain issues of Aqeedah that are not deeply rooted within us, that even though we feel the pain, we don't do anything more than that? What are you saying, bro?
Yeah, sort of. I think, you know, I'll give an analogy first, and then I'll come back and say, the first time I went on Hajj, I was expecting utopia, everyone on a religious vibe, everyone like there to worship the Creator, and you were expecting harmony in Makkah or around the Haram when you go in. But when you go there, it's actually anarchy. Yeah, and at the time of Salah, it stops, but people are fighting with each other. They look down at each other. They're just like the amount of fights and arguments that go on there, even in the state of Ihram. And then a brother referred to me, he goes, why are you expecting anything different when people are the same state as the ones that you see in England, Pakistan, wherever you are, just because they're in a different place? And I think there's links here. We need to understand the level that people are at and what they've been fed with and where are the issues with that, because that then manifests in the way people think. So, if we look at the old generation amongst our parents, we think differently to them on a number of issues and a number of things, right? And sometimes we can't even find alignment in a solution. It's because the way they were brought up and the way they were encouraged to think has shaped them and the way they look at things. And in the Ummah, we've got the same problem. It's a big problem, because I was reflecting on this over a couple of days ago. In the past, we probably had an issue where we had the bystander syndrome, whereby, someone else is going to deal with this problem. Yeah, I feel for it. I might give a bit of money, but someone else is going to deal with it. And over time, I think that's come down to the fact of like, people are now feeling a bit more. And I think there's severe dejection, if you like, that they want the situation to end and they just can't see how it's happening. And hence, the default is a rule is going to come and save us. But what doesn't happen is, and this is where there's a big understanding, and I guess this comes back down to Aqeedah, which is, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala require from us? In Ramadan, people are thinking is Taraweeh, is fasting, etc. Because that's what's being fed to them from the pulpit. The Imam is standing there and saying Ramadan is a blessed month, which it is. So you need to increase your ibadat, you need to increase your salah and your sadaqah, etc. But they don't define what ibadat is. Ibadat isn't just your 5 pillars or, just praying, fasting and giving zakat. Ibadat is actually referring to Allah and subhanahu wa ta'ala in absolutely everything we do. Thinking about the guy who's standing on the pulpit, when you look up to a leader is not a wise man, or super genius or something. There might be. A leader is someone who represents the ideas and values and beliefs that you've got and implements them and is the best person at implementing them. So he's going to be a reflection of the level that you are at. So when people are thinking, the responsibility is on the ruler or the leader or, the imam, etc., it's never going to happen, because he is only going to reflect the level you are at and keep it at that. I'll give you an example. Sorry, I might be going on a bit, but here's an example. The imam on Jummah yesterday started off brilliantly. He goes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in this book is the answer to everything. This is your solution to life's problem. And he goes, how many of us understand the Quran as this solution? It's beautiful. He goes, no one else can have this. This is what makes us strong. I was like, yeah, spot on. But he didn't refer back to why it is, how it is. And then the solution that he gave as a result of that is, yeah, all being good in the community, loving your neighbors, making sure your car's not far parked in front of other cars at the time of Jummah, etc. Important issues, but in the grand scheme of things, especially for the message you're giving, is kind of like a bit of a anticlimax there. But this is a problem. The Ummah has been suppressed intellectually in terms of their understanding. So when you don't believe something, or when you believe something is at a certain level, if you believe Islam is just your 5 pillars, then what are you going to do? You're going to implement those 5 pillars to the best of your ability. And I think that's where the problem lies. People's expectations are only as high as what they believe the belief or the solution to be.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying there, really, in a nutshell, is there's a level of responsibility that everyone carries in terms of improving their understanding of the deen, and improving their understanding of the life of the Messenger Muhammad Sallallahu, and not just deferring it to some guy on a pulpit. And I think that's really good. And then linking that to Rash's point about the head and the leader, which is completely correct. But then that's where you get a situation where, yes, you have the solution, and that is the solution. There's no doubt about that. Then the discussion really has to move on then from, yeah, that's the solution, but how do we get there? Because ultimately what it shows is that there's there's a process in order to get to a stage where that head is either going to be put on the body, or it's going to be woken up and brought to his senses. Rash, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to say, you can, in this example, you can take the role. Let's continue your analogy of obviously the body. You can take the role of the doctor, isn't it? The doctor at the end of the day needs to do some diagnosis. And yes, I've mentioned like the putting the head back on and finding the solution and the leader and all of those things. But there's two sides to this. When I mentioned the notion of critical mass, getting to critical mass doesn't need a leader. Yeah. Getting to critical mass is, like you said, if the body's been injected with viruses and there's other things in the body, then to get to critical mass in this example actually means knowing what those viruses are, getting rid of them, knowing what the issues are, getting rid of them, knowing what we need to unify on, making sure we unify on them, learning our deen to the level that we need to do. And that's all of us. And like you said, no one sat here at a pulpit going, that doesn't apply to us. That applies to every single one of us, including the scholars, all of them, because, we need to identify those. And there's so many of them. So really the answer of getting to unity and getting that head back on the body has many, many steps before it. Even if you use a different analogy, say you said the house needs a foundation. If you're going to project managing the building of a house, you're going to have to think, I've got to have a very strong foundation here. Then I've got to put up the walls. Then I've got to think how big each room needs to be based on my requirements. Then I've got to think about decorating the place. Then I've got to think about maintaining the place. Then I've got to think about how do I stop it getting damaged when it's raining. They're all different things that you need to do to build the house before you can completely finish, and then before you can live in there. Yeah. So there's loads of issues you can think about. Nationalism hasn't gone away in the minds of people. We say generally that it's not as potent as it was before, but it still hasn't gone away, and it creeps back in. This is one of the, sometimes people think that just because maybe nationalism or one of these kind of things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has warned us against, asabiya, he's warned us against that. We think that, oh, if it's died down a little bit, that as if it's not going to come back. Some of these things come back. So there's still an element of nationalism in people. We still have elements of, like you said, the viruses that kuffar are constantly attacking. They've not suddenly gone, oh, the Muslims, they haven't got any unity. Let's just leave them. They haven't.
Bro, a quick one just to throw in there is,
Yeah.
now they're pumping in that actually you don't even need the head.
You don't even need the head. Exactly. So, and then you got people from within the Muslims saying these kind of things. You got people from within the Muslims going, the top 20 or 30 things to do doesn't need a head. You're like, come on, and these are some of these issues that as Muslims, if we don't unite on the fact that what those correct understandings of Islam are, the shaitan is at work, the kuffar are at work, the munafiqeen are at work. So we shouldn't be critical too much of the Ummah, we should kind of warn ourselves and Muslims that we need to do something. But it's not like you're pushing against an open door. If the door was open and the solution's on the other side of the door, and you can just go, oh, everybody get together, it's a heavy door, let's just push it, it'll open. It's not as simple as that. It's a very well secured door. You know, the kuffar are securing that door, the munafiqeen, as I've just said, and there's all of these issues. So nationalism might be one of them. Our general priorities might be one of them. You know, just our love for the dunya is definitely one of them.
Big time, bro.
So I'm not going to go on and on, but there's so many. And I think to get to that critical mass, in my concluding bit, is that we need to get to that critical mass. And all that means is everybody need to start to realize that we're on this journey and we need to all come together before we see some of those solutions. And linking it quickly just to Gaza is so many other issues. Sometimes, look, Sudan issue, not many people don't even know what's going on in Sudan.
Messy, bro.
And it's messy. It's really bad. A number of people I've mentioned, even when I'm giving the dua at the end of the khutbah, I've mentioned Sudan, and people have come up to me afterwards and gone, "What's going on in Sudan?" Because I'm putting them side by side with Gaza because I keep mentioning them, and lots of people have asked, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. I thought people would just know." But the reason Gaza is a very special issue is because it's so deeply entrenched, so deeply within Aqeedah, and this is the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't it? That Gaza has that ability for us to all just wake up and really realize there's a problem here. Whereas I know, like you say, things might have quieted down a little bit, but it genuinely does have the ability to unite us in ways that any other conflict can't. And we need to really realize that as an ummah and then work together to get to that kind of critical mass. And that's where the bit you don't necessarily need the leader. The leader bit comes in afterwards, putting the head comes in afterwards. We need to rectify all those issues as well. And as Affy's saying, that part of it requires sacrifice and it requires a lot of work.
Yeah, of course, bro. MashaAllah, well said, man. I think also as well, something which what you're talking about there, Rash, and something that Affy mentioned as well. Another way of looking at it is, I'm not even talking about here in terms of a solution for a particular problem. Like Affy said earlier that, what does Allah require me to do, right? To solve a particular problem. Actually, what we need to do is we need to ask that same question to our existence. We have to ask the same questions to everything we do. Is like, in the dunya for X amount of time, right? Do I just live my life like every other Tom, Dick, and Harry? Okay, or is there a purpose here? Is there a meaning behind this? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want from me? What is the concept of enjoying the good, forbidding the evil? Why is it so important in Islam? Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described that the Ummah is the best nation sent to mankind? Because it enjoys the good, forbids the evil. I don't know about this. I think that's what it boils down to, because all the problems you mentioned, Rash, to do with materialism, to do with just being diverted by the dunya, also to the extent of trying to understand the other issues to do with the viruses. And why would you, if you're consumed by the dunya, why do you need to know about what's being pumped in the ummah? Why do you need to know about Vision 2030? Why do you need to know about these things? Because you're just, you just got your little family, you're just doing your nice 9 to 5, coming home, just doing your thing. It doesn't concern you. Where's that driving force? And I think ultimately what it boils down to is for Muslims to really question, what's this life's about? What is, and I think Ramadan certainly puts things into perspective, because what it does do is those things that generally divert us, especially when it comes to the dunya, which is your marital relations, your eating the nice food and the drink and all these sort of things are put on the back bench, on the back bench, where you should reflect, think, actually, these things which for 11 months around in the year, I'm just running behind, I'm running for this 1 month, I put it aside. I don't need these things now. These things are not important now. What's important is my taqwa. What's important is my purpose in life, right? We need to extend this. We need to extend this, because ultimately, that's when I personally believe you get to a stage where that pain that you're experiencing then transforms into an action. It transforms into a response, because the reality is the pain that we're talking about here, if you want to do something about this pain, it's going to come at a cost. Yeah, we've just seen what we've seen, the Gaza is being going on. People who have spoken about this sort of stuff, they've lost their jobs, they've been, ticked off the NHS list and all this sort of stuff. There's been repercussions. So people might feel the pain, but then if there's a stumbling block, which is I don't want to do anything about it, or I'll do the safe things. If we all stay on the safe side, nothing's going to happen, because it requires big sacrifices ultimately from all of us. Yeah. But guys, what I'm going to do is one last question I'm supposed to pose, which hopefully, inshallah, should lead into the kind of conclusion. And look, everyone listening, watching this, we're not going to be able to discuss this issue at length, because it's a huge issue. This is just a taster, and it should be something which hopefully triggers something off in your mind to want to reflect about this, maybe look into our heritage and Islamic tradition, and look at when maybe in the past we've had issues of disunity and how we came about it. But the question really I want to ask, what can we do as individuals who are going to be listening to this podcast, and also for us on the podcast, any practical advice on what we can actually do in order to either do a particular action, or even to try to generate some motivation to want to learn or something like this. But what would be some good steps for people listening to take away, which we can probably apply not just for the remaining 2-3 weeks in Ramadan, but actually continuing after Ramadan as well? I feel I'll begin with you, bro.
I think I think the greatest of all motivation is there, which is that in Ramadan, why do people up their level of activity, wherever it may be, is because they want to avoid the hellfire and they want to go to Jannah by pleasing our Creator. That 100% that's the case. The worst of people who we might perceive as the worst has that same thinking, where Ramadan brings that to life in them. So I would say make the most of this month when you've got that feeling there, to understand what is required from you to get that conclusion, which is Jannah and the avoidance of hellfire. And that has to be done on that individual level. Us giving the answers will not mean anything to you until you go and check yourself. It's like I was reading through the Hadith Qudsi the other day, and I'm not going to read the whole Hadith because it's quite long, but just to bring it to life, is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Jannah, he sent Jibreel to go and have a look at it. And Jibreel alayhi salam came back and said, whoever hears about this place would surely enter it, because it's that great. They will do whatever it takes. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed Jibreel the path to Jannah, which is hardship. It's not easy. There's going to be struggle and sacrifice. And then Jibreel alayhi salam came back and said, I fear that no one will be able to enter this because of the struggle that's involved. And then when Jahannam was showed, the exact opposite. Jibreel alayhi salam came back and said, whoever sees this place will surely not enter it, because they'll do whatever it takes to avoid it. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed Jibreel the path to Jahannam, which is probably the biggest trap that we're in, with all the things that you talked about, the distractions, what's going to happen to my family, what's going to happen to my job, etc. And when Jibreel came back after looking at the path to Jahannam, he replied, I fear that no one will be able to avoid it. So when I think it's just coming back to the conclusion, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us ample opportunity. He says He doesn't burden us with more than what we can handle. He's given us the solution. He's given us the way out to avoid Jahannam. The question is whether we want to take it or not.
SubhanAllah, bro. And before I come to you, Rash, just one quick point which kind of triggered off when Affy was saying, and I think it's a really good kind of formula, where when we're speaking about the issue of Gaza and all these, and responsibility and Ummah and response, in fact, if what Affy said there was your starting point, you want to get to Jannah, You want to avoid Jahannam. Then you look at what is needed for me to get to Jannah. And if one of those things is that you need to be the support of your Muslim brothers and sisters, then would you not do that? Because remember, you need to get to Jannah. Would you not do that? Then why would you ignore it? Rather than starting off with that, we have to start off from the beginning, because that gives us the motivation of wanting to help someone thousands and thousands of miles away as if they were your own brothers and sisters. Because ultimately, on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, when you are on your own, where your own family, your own mother's not going to want to know you, is these things that are going to be, in your favor to get to where we need to be, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah. Jazakallah khair, Affy. Rash, talk to me.
Yeah, inshallah. So I'll firstly just mention what I mentioned at my khutbah last week. Obviously we know the month of Qur'an is Ramadan, is the month of Qur'an. So I was saying to my congregation really is that, look, every year we make an intention. I think many of us do this to kind of complete the Qur'an in that month, reciting it. But I said, look, it's really important that, I don't want to kind of stamp on anybody's intention at the end. Intention is important at the end of the day. But the issue we sometimes have is we have this intention to read it without understanding. We equally have an intention to listen to it in Taraweeh, again, without any understanding, because most of us are non-Arab at the end of the day. Yeah. And my message really to my congregation was, look, we've done that for many Ramadans again and again and again, and we actually generally find ourselves in a worse situation as an ummah. Maybe not as individuals necessarily we develop, but I said, let's add another action to that if possible, is to learn what the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says in the Quran, do they not reflect on the Quran, or are there locks on their hearts? So this is the verse that I was referring to when I was speaking to the brothers there. And it's because the reflection only comes with understanding. Transformation only comes with understanding. Just listening to something doesn't transform you. Don't get me wrong, sometimes there are people who have come to Islam because they've heard the beauty of how beautiful the Quran sounds and they want to know more. So I'm not saying that that's not possible, but actually transformation in terms of actions comes from understanding something, taking on that knowledge, having a change in your thinking, and then acting upon it. That can't happen if you don't understand a word of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. So my first bit of advice to myself first, and that's what I've been trying this Ramadan as much as possible, is, yes, I want to try and do as much of the Quran as possible, but I haven't made this intention that I have to complete it. I've made intention that whatever I read, I actually read the meaning as well, and I reflect on it. And that way, and for me, it's helping because I'm reading something and I'm going, that links to what I understood before. That bit I didn't understand that much. Then I go and read around the topic. So I think first and foremost, practical steps is, as an ummah, as collectively, we need to do that. We actually have access to the Creator's words. We need to access that, and that is the first starting point. Because at the end of the day, like the Affy was saying, when the Imam stood up with the Quran and saying, all of our answers are in here. If you don't understand what the book is saying because you don't understand Arabic and you're not looking at the translation, how do you know? Okay, you refer to someone else, great, but the book wasn't just revealed, the Quran wasn't just revealed for the learned people, it was revealed for all of us. So first and foremost, we need to access that. We live in a very individualistic society. So secondly, because we're in such an individualistic society, certainly as we're probably similar age, I don't know about yourselves. I think because of work, because of family, because of we're not being in the, we're not in that uni life anymore. We're not in the life where we all just lads get together and, that kind of life anymore. You guys might do it. I don't do it too much. I need to maybe a little bit more. But being in that environment where you're just discussing stuff, I found that I did that a lot more in those times before marriage. Yeah, before getting bogged down with like family life and things. So that would be my other bit of advice to people, is that, look, get those circles of people, talk to them, discuss these issues, ask these questions. Knowledge and thought and ideas travel when people speak. We're in this really individual society where social media kind of is what is that discussion forum, rather than face to face. And yeah, social media has a bearing, but it can't ever fully replace how you can get people to transform by talking to them. I think that's also important. And then kind of my last thing would be to say is that if we're not old young enough to do that bit maybe, but that means our children are coming up. They're going to be in those places. If we don't prepare them now to be talking about getting rid of all of those viruses that you talked about being injected into the ummah, if we don't prepare our kids to be able to identify those viruses, our kids need to be the antidote. We do, no doubt, and we carry on, and we're going to carry this. I'm sure we'll carry on speaking like this until we're 50s, 60s, whatever, and nobody will be listening to us, but we'll carry on speaking about it because we feel it's our duty. But if we don't then prepare the next generation to be the antidote to these ills and these ideas and the shaitan and what he's continuing to pump into the people, then we won't achieve our objective. So that we need to do. And the confidence has to come from the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on our side. And the confidence has to come from the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised victory. And also, finally, the confidence has to come from the fact that the kuffar and the falsehood, it is destined to perish. And we've seen it. Look at all of this stuff that's happening. The people are being everybody is calling the Israel liars now. Every single thing that they said, the babies, the rape, the things under the hospitals, everybody's now going, wait there a minute. These guys lied about everything. And then they're just destroying people. The amount of people that not even politicized are going, wait there a minute. This issue is a lot simpler than we thought it was. These lot are just crazy, bloodthirsty people. So the falsehood inevitably exposes itself. So let's not lose confidence. The falsehood will expose itself, but we can't just sit there and go, yeah, Allah's doing his bit. We're just gonna leave it. Then we'll be like the people of that Musa alayhi salam, where we'll be like the Bani Israel. We've been listening to Surah Al-Baqarah, haven't we, for the first few days of Ramadan. We'll be like them. We'll be just like, yeah, let the Prophet, let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fix all the issues. We'll just chill. We can't be like that. So I think those are practical steps, and those, hopefully there is that degree of confidence. Yes, our ummah is suffering, but the ones that are suffering, Allah's going to reward them with Jannah. Our ease is our test, and if we don't do something about it and don't do those actions, then we'll fail the test. They'll have succeeded, even though they suffered. We'll have failed, even though we didn't suffer.
Jazakallah khair, bro. Jazakallah khair. Just a couple of things from me before we end. Is on building on what you guys have said. Another thing which is, I think, important is, people in your community, the scholars, the imams, sit with them, be in that environment, and bring up these issues. Maybe not, calling them out in a khutbah and stuff like that, but generally speak to them, because it could well be that they might not even, they've been taught in a certain way that they've never even thought about that. But they have the knowledge, they have the tools. So, this is going to improve them, it's going to improve the community. I think that, and to be honest with you, just being around the learned people, it gives you that vibe anyways. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. They should remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And one last thing is that I think we've had a really healthy discussion. And I think I do want to end with the importance of the head, the importance of the leader. 3rd of March was the end of the Ottoman state. And I think it is something that, Muslims should look into history and think about. Without having political unity, we don't have that, that head, which then instructs and guides the ummah. And I think this is just a reality. And when we talk about unity, and Rash asked the question earlier, I don't know if anyone thinks we didn't answer it, about whether the ummah unites first and then you get the leader, or whether you get the leader and then the ummah unites. The reality is that the leader has to appear, but he's not going to appear from the sky. He's going to appear through the work carried out by him and people in a certain location. And once you have that nucleus, once you have that area where you have Islam being established and you have a leader, then you give the rest of the ummah something to unite behind. And I think this is very important. We need this. If the Ansar almost went to war because of because of being misled, because of stories about the old wars, that they had and the people who had died by the Jewish boy, then we can obviously, and we see it, be disunited on many things. However, we need something to unite behind. And I think that's really important. So, guys, on that note, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to bring the podcast to a close. Jazakallah khair for you both. I didn't ask you how Ramadan's going because these topics, we need to get straight into them. But I do pray that you're making the most of it. And inshallah, may Allah reward you for what you've done so far and hopefully what you will do for the remaining part of Ramadan.
Amen.
And for everyone listening, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share this with your family and friends, inshallah. And on that note, once again, Jazakallah khair, my brothers. And to everybody else, until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.